Jungkook's shocking words about BANGSI HYUK left Jimmy Fallon in tears, uncover the hidden truth in a story of betrayal, fear, and revelation. What Jungkook just said about BANGSI HYUK left Jimmy Fallon in tears. Do you really want me to say this on live television? Jungkook's voice cracked, his eyes burning under the studio lights as the audience fell into a suffocating silence. Jimmy Fallon froze, his trademark smile trembling at the edges, uncertain whether the confession unfolding before him was scripted, staged, or the unraveling of a truth too heavy to contain. Cameras kept rolling, millions were watching. And Jungkook, breathing as if the weight of the entire world pressed against his chest, leaned closer to the microphone. The stage smelled faintly of sweat and burning electricity from the spotlights, yet beneath it all was something darker, an invisible tension that crawled across the studio floor like smoke. Jungkook's hands trembled, not with nerves of performance but with a deeper fear. He knew the words he was about to spill would fracture more than just the glossy surface of a talk show interview. They would crack open an entire empire. Jimmy's laughter, once effortless, turned into a forced chuckle. His eyes darted to the producers, who stood motionless behind the glass, torn between cutting the broadcast or letting it spiral into chaos. "Jungkook," Jimmy whispered, as if trying to save him from himself, "you don't have to—" But Jungkook interrupted, his voice sharp, his pain too raw to mask. "BANGSI HYUK, he wasn't the man you think he was. He wasn't just a producer. He wasn't just a visionary. He controlled us in ways no one outside could ever understand." His words hit like shards of broken glass thrown into the crowd. The audience gasped. Some leaned forward, others recoiled, unable to process the confession. For a moment, Jimmy couldn't breathe. His eyes glossed with unshed tears, not just from the revelation, but from the sheer weight of the courage it took to speak. The air crackled with energy, the kind that precedes a storm no one can escape. Jungkook's memories rushed back, not as gentle echoes, but as violent collisions. The late nights in soundproof rooms, the contracts signed under duress, the rehearsals that pushed bodies past breaking points, the unspoken fear that even friendship could be weaponized. He remembered the silence of his brothers, their exchanged glances, their swallowed words. He remembered being told to smile while his soul begged to scream. He inhaled, steadying himself, his jaw tightening as his truth clawed its way out. "I can't keep pretending anymore," he said, softer now, almost a plea. Every lyric, every performance, it wasn't just art, it was survival. And Hyuk made sure we never forgot who held the chains. The studio no longer felt like a place of entertainment. It felt like a confessional, a battlefield, a stage drenched in the unseen blood of sacrifice. Jimmy's hand instinctively reached across the desk, not for the camera, not for the audience, but for the trembling young man before him. He whispered, voice breaking, "Jungkook, you don't have to carry this alone." But Jungkook shook his head. His eyes glistened with a mixture of defiance and despair. He had carried it alone for too long. Tonight, he had chosen to break. And as Jimmy wiped a tear that slipped against his will, the world outside that studio shifted, sensing that a truth too dangerous to remain hidden had just been spoken aloud. The audience sat in stunned silence, the roar of the city beyond those walls forgotten. Under the blinding lights, one man's confession shattered illusions, and with it, the fragile barrier between the myth of idols and the reality of human suffering. For Jungkook, it was not the end, nor the beginning. It was the moment the walls finally cracked, and the echoes of what lay behind them demanded to be heard. The studio was still buzzing from the shockwave of Jungkook's revelation. The cameras remained fixed, the red lights blinking as if recording history itself. No one dared to cut the broadcast. The silence was thick, interrupted only by the uneven rhythm of Jungkook's breathing. Jimmy leaned forward, his hands clasped together, trying to ground the moment. His voice trembled as he asked, "Jungkook, are you saying BANGSI HYUK, your mentor, your producer, wasn't the man the world believes he is?" Jungkook looked up, his gaze sharp, his expression torn between anger and grief. He was never just a mentor. He was a puppeteer. Every choice we thought we made, songs, appearances, even moments that looked spontaneous, they were designed, scripted, forced. His voice cracked and then steadied again. And if we ever resisted, we paid for it in ways you can't imagine. A murmur rippled through the audience, but Jungkook pressed on, his words now relentless. Jimmy tried to interject, but you're only for Jungkook to slam his palm against the desk, startling everyone in the room. Do you know what it feels like, Jimmy? To sing words that are supposed to be your truth, but they're not yours at all? To smile in front of millions, while behind the curtain you're broken, controlled, silenced? Jimmy swallowed hard, visibly shaken. I can't imagine. But Jungkook, you're free now. You're here. You can tell your story. Jungkook gave a bitter laugh, one that sounded more like a sob choked down. Free? You think speaking here makes me free? Do you know what will happen when I walk out of this studio tonight? They'll come for me, for all of us. They'll try to erase me. The room grew colder, the air heavy with dread. Jimmy's usual cheerful tone was gone. He was now just a man staring at another man who was unraveling live on his stage. He reached out again, this time placing his hand firmly on Jungkook's arm. Then let them try. The world is watching now. They can't silence you anymore. Jungkook's lips trembled. He wanted to believe it, but the shadow of fear was carved too deeply into his bones. You don't know the power they hold, he whispered. His eyes flickered toward the audience as if expecting anyone to leap up and drag him off stage. Suddenly, from the back of the studio, a voice pierced the silence. Stop this, Jungkook. A man in a dark suit stood up, his face partly hidden, but his presence commanded attention. Security moved hesitantly, unsure whether to intervene. The audience gasped as the man stepped forward, his tone icy. You don't know what you're saying. Sit down, apologize, now. Jungkook's entire body stiffened. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the desk. His voice came out hoarse, shaking with both rage and terror. You think I'm afraid of you anymore? I lived in fear long enough. The man's lips curled into a cold smile. Then you've just signed your own death sentence. The studio exploded with chaos, audience members shouting, security rushing, Jimmy standing, his eyes darting between Jungkook and the intruder. Cameras zoomed in on Jungkook's face, capturing every flicker of fear, every ounce of defiance. Jimmy shouted over the noise, his voice cracking. Who are you? What is this? The man ignored him, his gaze locked only on Jungkook. You were warned. We gave you everything, fame, wealth, the world. And this is how you repay us? Jungkook rose from his seat, his chest heaving, his voice breaking into a scream that cut through the pandemonium. You gave me chains, not freedom. You took my voice, my brothers, my life, and now you want to take my truth too, not anymore. For a split second, the world seemed to freeze. Jimmy stood frozen, tears streaking down his face as he realized the depth of the darkness they were all standing in. The audience was no longer watching a show. They were witnessing the unraveling of an empire. And as security finally lunged toward the man in the suit, Jungkook's words echoed through the studio, raw and unstoppable. The world deserves to know who you really are. The man's face twisted in rage as he was pulled back, his voice a venomous promise. This isn't over, Jungkook, not by a long shot. The lights above flickered, the audience screamed, and in that moment the glamorous stage of late-night entertainment was transformed into a battleground of truth and terror. Jimmy clutched the edge of his desk, whispering to himself in disbelief. My God, what have we just uncovered? The cameras kept rolling. Millions were watching. And Jungkook, trembling but unbroken, stood in the center of it all, his truth finally unchained, even as the storm closed in around him. The studio was still in chaos. Audience members were being ushered out, some screaming, others filming on their phones despite the desperate pleas of security. The man in the dark suit was dragged away, his voice echoing like a curse. But the damage was already done. Jimmy Fallon stood pale, clutching his cue cards as if they were a lifeline. Across from him, Jungkook sat back down heavily, his chest rising and falling with violent breaths. His eyes were glassy, filled with fear, but his jaw was clenched in defiance. Jimmy leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Jungkook could hear, though the cameras were still rolling. You just put your life in danger. Do you realize that? Jungkook's lips quivered, but he forced himself to meet Jimmy's gaze. My life was never mine to begin with. Tonight, I'm finally taking it back. The crowd outside the stage glass pressed against the barriers, chanting, whispering, some crying. The producers argued heatedly, some shouting for the broadcast to be cut, others insisting it was too late, the world had already heard enough. The air smelled of sweat, perfume, and raw panic. Every second felt like a blade suspended over all of them. Jimmy turned toward the cameras, breaking protocol. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are seeing is not a scripted performance. This is real. I don't know if you understand the gravity of what's happening, but Jungkook has chosen to share something that... His voice faltered, his throat tight. He looked back at the singer. Jungkook, if you want to walk away, we can end this now. I don't want to see you get hurt. Jungkook shook his head slowly, strands of hair falling into his eyes. If I stop now, then everything I said means nothing. They'll spin it, twist it, erase it. They'll call me unstable, say I was tired, confused, anything but the truth. No. Tonight, they don't get to bury me. Jimmy's hands trembled as he set the cue cards down. Then tell all of us, what exactly did BANGSI HYUK do? The silence in the studio was unbearable, as if the very walls were leaning in to listen. Jungkook exhaled shakily, his voice low at first. He built us up only to own us. Every smile you saw was rehearsed. Every word in interviews was scripted. If someone slipped, there were consequences. We weren't allowed to be ourselves. Not ever. His tone hardened, the raw anger finally breaking through. He treated us like products, not people. Jimmy whispered. And you? What about you personally? The question pierced him deeper than he expected. Jungkook's eyes flickered with 1,000 unspoken memories. His voice cracked as he answered. I lost myself, Jimmy. I forgot what my own laughter sounded like. I forgot who I was outside the stage. And every time I tried to remember, he reminded all of us that we belonged to him. The audience, though half-emptied, gasped audibly. Some shouted words of support, others murmured in shock. Jimmy leaned forward, tears glistening. This is horrifying. But Jungkook, what made you speak now? Why tonight? Jungkook swallowed hard, his throat dry, his fingers tapping nervously against the desk. Because I saw what it did to my brothers. I saw the light leave their eyes one by one, and I couldn't stand by anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that the dream was worth the cost. Not when the dream was killing us. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from backstage equipment falling, someone shouting. The producers rushed, trying to contain it, but the noise carried. Jungkook flinched, his body instinctively recoiling as though expecting violence. Jimmy grabbed his arm tightly. Hey, look at me, you're safe here. Jungkook's eyes darted around the studio, paranoia written all over his face. Safe? No one's safe, Jimmy, they're already here. Jimmy hesitated, fear flickering in his own eyes, but he steadied his voice. Then let the world see them for who they are. Don't let fear win. Jungkook leaned closer to the microphone, his voice trembling but powerful. BANGSI HYUK, he didn't just control us. He controlled the industry, the press, the very stories people believed. And if anyone dared to question him, he paused, his throat tightening, his eyes wet. They disappeared. Do you understand? They were erased, careers destroyed, lives shattered, some gone without a trace. Jimmy's face went white, his voice barely audible. Are you suggesting there were people who... Jungkook's silence was louder than any confirmation. His eyes said everything his lips couldn't. A producer burst onto the stage, panicked. Cut the cameras, now! But the control room refused, chaos splitting them apart. Millions were still watching, millions waiting, millions holding their breath. Jimmy looked directly into the camera. If this broadcast goes dark, know that what you've heard tonight is the truth. Jungkook deserves to be heard. The lights flickered again, and Jungkook sat straighter, his voice sharper now, laced with fury and desperation. This is bigger than me, bigger than any of us. The world deserves to know how deep this goes. He pointed toward the camera, his hand shaking. Don't believe the lies they will tell tomorrow. Remember this moment. Remember what I said, because they will try to bury me, and if they succeed, don't let my voice die with me. Jimmy's face crumpled, the tears finally falling as he whispered into the chaos. Oh my God! Jungkook! The studio erupted once more, producers shouting, audience members screaming, security clashing with unknown figures near the exit. The set, that once sparkled with laughter and light, now burned with fear, rage, and revelation. And through it all, Jungkook stood his ground, trembling but unbroken, his confession still hanging in the air like smoke from a fire no one could put out. The air inside the studio felt poisonous, thick with panic and whispers. The set lights flickered like failing stars, casting uneasy shadows across the audience who had not yet left. Security fought to contain the commotion backstage, the muffled shouts of men in suits piercing through the fragile barrier of order. Jimmy sat frozen, his cue cards forgotten on the floor. Jungkook's words still echoed like a war drum in the silence between screams. Then the man in the dark suit reappeared, no longer restrained. His tie was loose, his eyes glinting with fury. Security scrambled after him, but he pushed forward with terrifying confidence, stopping just short of the stage. His voice carried like venom across the studio. "Jungkook, one more word and you'll regret you were ever born." The audience gasped, some standing, some shrinking back in terror. Jimmy leapt up, his hands raised. "Hey, this is live television. You can't just come in here and threaten him like this." The man sneered. "Live? Do you think that matters? By tomorrow, no one will remember this broadcast. The tapes will vanish, the headlines will shift, and all of you will go back to sleep." Jungkook's hands trembled against the desk, but he rose slowly to his feet, his voice cut sharp through the madness. "That's what you always counted on, isn't it? Fear, silence. But I'm not silent anymore." The man laughed bitterly. "You think you're brave. You're naive. You don't know the contracts you signed, the lives we own. You were never more than a pawn in a game you don't even understand." Jimmy moved between them, his voice shaking but resolute. "You're not going to silence him here, not tonight." The man's smile darkened. "Then maybe you'd like to share the consequences, Fallon. Do you want to know how it feels when your family becomes leverage, when your career is dismantled overnight? This boy isn't exposing the truth, he's digging graves." Jungkook's voice rose, fury burning through his fear. "Say it then, say what you did. Tell them how you made us beg for rest. Tell them how you erased the ones who fought back. Or are you too much of a coward to admit it?" The man's face hardened, his eyes narrowing into something almost feral. "Careful, boy. You're standing on the edge of a cliff. Push me too far, and you'll take everyone you love down with you." Jungkook's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. "You already did that. You already destroyed the people I loved. You left scars that will never heal." His voice cracked as tears threatened. "I don't care what happens to me anymore, but I won't let you bury the truth again." Jimmy turned toward the cameras, his voice breaking with urgency. "Don't turn away from this. The world is watching. Record this. Share it. Do not let them silence him." The producers screamed in the control room, half of them begging to cut the feed, the others paralyzed by the enormity of what was unfolding. The cameras stayed on, blinking like unblinking eyes, broadcasting every tear, every tremor, every threat. The man in the suit stepped closer, his voice now low, a hiss meant to intimidate. "You have no idea the forces at play here. BANGSI HYUK wasn't just a producer, he was the face of something much larger. You expose him, and you ignite a war you cannot win." Jungkook's eyes blazed, his voice raw. "Then let there be war, because I'd rather burn in the truth than live forever in your lies." The words hit the air like thunder. The audience erupted, half in cheers, half in terror. Some shouted his name in solidarity, others screamed for help, for escape, for someone to end the madness. The man lunged forward, but security finally overpowered him, dragging him back, kicking and cursing. His voice echoed down the corridors as he disappeared. "This isn't over, Jungkook. You'll regret every word." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ragged sound of Jungkook's breathing. His hands shook as he clutched the edge of the desk, his body trembling from the weight of everything he had unleashed. Jimmy reached for him, steadying him with a hand on his shoulder. "You did it!" Jimmy whispered, tears in his eyes. "You said it! The whole world heard you!" Jungkook shook his head, his voice hollow, almost broken. "No, Jimmy, this was just the beginning. They won't stop. They'll come harder now." His eyes glistened with both fear and defiance. "But so will I." The lights above buzzed violently, cameras swaying as though the building itself trembled under the weight of revelation. And in that charged silence, as if the whole world was holding its breath, Jungkook stared directly into the camera lens, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You wanted to know the truth? Then follow the trail of broken lives. Follow the voices that went silent. Follow the shadows where BANGSI HYUK hid his power, and when you do, you'll see the monster behind the music." The audience erupted again, but this time it wasn't just panic. It was something larger, something unstoppable. Whispers turned into chants, fear into fury, silence into a storm. And as the stage shook with their voices, Jungkook stood taller, broken yet unyielding, knowing there was no turning back from the truth he had just set free. The studio was locked down, but the energy inside felt like a riot trapped within four walls. Security scrambled to secure every exit, their radios buzzing with urgent codes. Outside, the sound of sirens bled into the night air, paparazzi, police, and protesters all colliding in the chaos that Jungkook's confession had set loose. Inside, the set still glowed under the hot lights, but the glitter of late-night comedy had been stripped away. It now looked like a war zone of truth, fear, and trembling courage. Jimmy sat back down, shaking as he ran both hands over his face. I've hosted this show for years, Jungkook. I've interviewed presidents, kings, rock stars, but I've never seen anything like this. What you just did, this is bigger than you know. Jungkook's eyes, bloodshot and wet, locked onto Jimmy's. His voice cracked with exhaustion and fury. I know exactly how big this island. Do you think I didn't weigh every second of this? Do you think I don't know the cost? His voice rose, bitter and trembling. But I'd rather die with the truth than live one more day as their puppet. Jimmy flinched at the word die, his heart sinking. Don't say that, Jungkook. Don't even think that way. You're not alone anymore. The whole world is watching. They can't silence you now. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh, his shoulders shaking. You still don't understand, Jimmy. You think cameras protect me. You think millions of views will keep me safe. Cameras can be shut off. Headlines can be rewritten. People can be erased. They've done it before. Jimmy's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes wet with a mix of fear and compassion. Then tell us everything. Don't hold back. If this is the only chance you have, take it. Jungkook's jaw tightened. He dragged his trembling hand across his face, as if bracing himself for a fall. Then, with a voice laced with both pain and fire, he began. BANGSI HYUK built his empire on more than music. Behind the songs and the smiles was a machine that fed on us. We were currency, not people. Our sweat, our tears, our youth, it was all fuel for his power. The audience leaned forward, transfixed. One woman shouted from the back, "We love you, Jungkook." Her voice cracked with tears. Jungkook froze for a second, overwhelmed. But then he continued, "Love? That's the cruelest part. He made us believe that love the fans love was the only thing that made the pain worth it. He twisted it, used it, turned it into a weapon. Every time we wanted to break, they told us, do it for the fans. And so we bled for you, night after night, while he sat in the shadows counting every drop." Jimmy pressed his hand to his mouth, horrified. "You're telling me it wasn't just pressure, it was abuse." Jungkook's fists clenched against the desk. His voice thundered, shaking with rage. It was slavery dressed as stardom. The audience gasped audibly, a collective wound opening in the room. Jimmy stammered, "Jungkook, these are heavy accusations. Do you have proof?" Jungkook's eyes glistened with a dangerous fire. "I am the proof. My body, my mind, the scars you can't see, they're all evidence. And I'm not the only one. Do you think I'm speaking just for me? No. I'm speaking for the brothers who can't open their mouths because the fear is still choking them." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the faint hum of cameras. Jimmy leaned forward, desperate. "Then name them. Tell us who else suffered." Jungkook's face twisted with torment. He shook his head violently. "No, I won't drag them into this. They didn't choose to speak tonight, I did. If I name them, they'll suffer the punishment meant for me." His eyes darted to the camera, sharp as a blade. "But to those watching my brothers, my friends, you know I'm telling the truth. And one day I hope you'll find the strength to join me." A sudden voice rang from offstage. Another producer had stormed in, face red with panic. "Enough! End this now before the network collapses. Do you have any idea what lawsuits are coming?" Jimmy whirled on him, fury flashing across his face. "Do you hear yourself? Lawsuits? This is about lives, about truth." The producer pointed a shaking finger at Jungkook. "You don't understand what he's unleashing. There are contracts, investors, entire governments tied into this. If he keeps talking, it's not just a scandal, it's a collapse." Jungkook's laugh was bitter, raw. "Good. Let it collapse. Let it all burn. Maybe then we can rebuild something real, something human." The room erupted in shouting, producers against producers, security against intruders, fans crying in the audience, Jimmy caught in the middle. And then, through the storm, Jimmy turned back to Jungkook, his eyes desperate. "Jungkook, what happens next? What do you want?" Jungkook's breathing slowed, his gaze distant as if he were seeing far beyond the studio walls. "What do I want?" he whispered. Then louder, his voice trembling but unbreakable. "I want freedom. I want the truth to spread faster than their lies. I want every young artist who dreams of music to know the cost before they sign their soul away. And I want BANGSI HYUK to face the world without his mask." The camera zoomed in on his face, his tears glistening like fire. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, sobbing, their voices a storm of solidarity. Jimmy stood as well, tears streaking down his cheeks. He reached across the desk, gripping Jungkook's trembling hand. "Then say it, Jungkook. Say it so the whole world can hear it." Jungkook looked straight into the lens, his voice breaking but firm. "BANGSI HYUK is not a savior. He's a predator, and I will not let him hide behind our music any longer." The studio shook with the sound of screams, applause, chaos, and dread. Security rushed the stage as the feed threatened to cut, but for one breathtaking moment, the truth blazed like a fire too bright to be extinguished. And in that moment, Jungkook was no longer just an idol. He was a voice, a weapon, a spark that could ignite a revolution. The network had lost control. Outside the studio, crowds gathered, their chants thundering against the glass walls, demanding answers. Inside, the stage still blazed with cameras that no one dared to shut off. The audience had been told to leave, but half refused, their faces wet with tears, their phones still raised, recording every second. The late-night comedy stage had transformed into a tribunal of truth, and Jungkook stood at the center, his body trembling, his voice burning with defiance. Jimmy Fallon, usually the embodiment of lighthearted humor, now looked shattered. He sat hunched over his desk, one hand clutching his temple, the other gripping Jungkook's wrist as though afraid the young man might collapse. His voice was low, rough. "Jungkook, do you realize what you've just done? You've set the world on fire. There's no going back from this." Jungkook's eyes were red, his throat raw, but his voice rose, sharp enough to cut through the chaos. "I don't want to go back. I want the fire to spread. I want the whole world to see him for what he island, for what he's always been." From the shadows, another voice emerged, cool and venomous. A woman in a sleek black dress stepped onto the stage, her heels echoing like gunshots. She was calm where the suited man had been furious, and that calm was even more terrifying. "Enough," she said, her accent sharp, her eyes like daggers fixed on Jungkook. "You've said too much already." The audience gasped, recognizing her. A high-ranking executive, someone who had always been seen as the elegant architect of the industry. Jimmy stood, his voice rising with outrage. "You have no right to be here. This is my stage." She cut him off with a cold smile. "Your stage. No, Mr. Fallon. This stage belongs to us, just like him." She turned her gaze back to Jungkook. "Sit down and retract everything you just said, now." Jungkook's body stiffened, his fists clenching at his sides. "Retract? You want me to lie again? To smile and pretend while you keep building your empire on our bones? No, not this time." Her smile faltered. "You think you're brave, but you're just a child. You have no idea the deals that were made, the contracts you signed. Do you understand what's written in those pages, Jungkook? You don't own your words, your songs, or even your silence. We do." Jimmy slammed his hand on the desk. "This is madness. Do you hear yourself? You're talking about owning a human being." Her eyes flicked to him, bored and dismissive. "It's not madness, it's business. And business is what built this empire. Do you think millions of fans worship at his feet because of luck? No. It was crafted, engineered, controlled. Without us, he's just another boy with a microphone." The words struck Jungkook like a knife, but instead of breaking him, they ignited him. His voice thundered, raw with rage. "Without you, I'm still human. With you, I was nothing but a ghost. You stole my voice, my nights, my freedom. And now you want to steal the truth? Not anymore." The woman's face hardened, the mask of elegance cracking to reveal fury. "You don't understand what you're inviting. This isn't just about BANGSI HYUK. This is bigger than him, bigger than you, bigger than anything you can imagine. If you keep speaking, Jungkook, you won't just destroy yourself, you'll bring down your brothers, your fans, everyone who ever believed in you. Jungkook's chest heaved, his voice shaking with pain. They already destroyed me. They already destroyed us. And if the truth brings it all crashing down, then so be it. At least the world will finally see what it cost. The audience erupted, some shouting in support, others crying out in fear. Jimmy turned to the woman, his voice rising with desperation. Do you even hear what you're saying? You're confessing to everything right now, live on television. She straightened, her composure snapping back into place. Do you really think this broadcast will survive the night? By morning it will be gone, and so will he. The threat hung in the air like poison. Security hesitated, unsure whether to protect the guest, the host, or themselves. The producers shouted conflicting orders through earpieces, their faces pale with dread. Jungkook stepped forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that still carried through the studio. You can erase tapes. You can silence broadcasts. But you can't erase the millions who saw this. You can't silence them all. He pointed at the audience, at the cameras, at the world beyond. The truth is out, and no matter how hard you try, it will spread faster than your lies. Jimmy, his voice cracking with emotion, turned to the camera, tears running down his face. Please, if you're watching this, record it, share it, protect it. Don't let them bury it. The woman's eyes narrowed, fury boiling beneath her calm exterior. She turned sharply on her heels, storming off stage, her voice trailing like a warning. You've made a fatal mistake, Jungkook. We don't forgive, and we don't lose. The studio shook with tension, the chants outside growing louder, more urgent. Jungkook stood in the center of it all, trembling but unyielding, his body fragile, his spirit unbreakable. He looked at Jimmy, his voice soft now, almost broken. Do you think anyone will believe me? Jimmy gripped his shoulder, firm and steady. They already do, and they always will. The lights above flickered again, and for a moment it felt like the world itself was trembling under the weight of what had just been unleashed. And in that trembling silence, Jungkook wiped his tears, raised his chin, and whispered to himself like a vow. Then let them come. The crowd outside had swollen into a living storm. Their chants shook the glass walls of the studio, a deafening wave that crashed in sync with the pounding of feet and fists demanding to be heard. Police lines blurred with the chaos, their radios screaming over the sound of thousands crying Jungkook's name. Inside, the studio had become an island of hysteria, producers running wild, security fraying at the edges, the lights buzzing dangerously above, as if even the electricity had caught fire from the tension. Jimmy Fallon was no longer a host. He looked more like a man trapped in someone else's war, his hands shaking as he tried to keep control of a ship already sinking. He turned to Jungkook, who sat slumped against the desk, eyes closed, chest heaving, his entire frame vibrating with exhaustion and defiance. Jungkook, Jimmy said, his voice raw with urgency. They won't stop. You heard her. They'll come harder now. If you want out, say it. We'll shut this down. Jungkook opened his eyes slowly, the dark circles beneath them like bruises carved by years of silence. He looked at Jimmy, then at the cameras, his voice cracking but steady. If I shut down now, then everything I just said becomes nothing but a scandal, a headline. I won't let that happen. Tonight, I have to burn it all. Before Jimmy could reply, a booming voice cut through the air, echoing across the stage speakers. Jungkook. It was deep, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. The audience stiffened. The producers froze. From the shadows at the side of the stage, another figure emerged. Tall, composed, dressed in a simple gray suit that radiated authority. His presence was enough to silence even the storm outside. BANGSI HYUK himself had entered the stage. Gasps tore through the audience, some shrieking, others whispering his name like a curse. Cameras swiveled instinctively toward him, capturing his every calculated step. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes burned with a quiet menace. He stopped a few feet from Jungkook, hands clasped behind his back, as if this were a boardroom, not a battlefield. Jimmy's face went pale. My God, it's you! Bangsi's lips curved into the faintest smile. Of course it's me. Who else could end this circus? He turned his gaze to Jungkook, cold and deliberate. Stand up! Jungkook didn't move. His fists clenched on the desk, his voice low and shaking. I'm done standing for you. Bangsi tilted his head, studying him as though he were an insect pinned beneath glass. You think these people care about your suffering? You think they'll love you once they see the broken, bitter child behind the idol? No, Jungkook. They'll devour you. And when they're done, they'll move on to the next star I create. The audience erupted in boos and shouts, some screaming liar, while others shouted Jungkook's name. The noise swelled like thunder, but Bangsi's calm remained unshaken. He raised his voice just enough to pierce through. Do you really believe you can survive without me? Do you think you'd have anything if not for the empire I built? You were nothing. I made you everything. Jungkook shot to his feet, his voice cracking like a whip. You made me a prisoner. His chest heaved, his eyes blazing with fury and pain. You took our dreams and chained them. You took our music and turned it into your weapon. You broke us and now you want to stand here and claim you built us? You built your empire on our blood. The studio shook with the roar of the audience, their voices splitting into chants of, Free him and Tell the truth. Jimmy stood between them now, his hands raised as if to stop a collision he couldn't possibly control. Please, please, don't do this here. Not like this. Bangsi's eyes narrowed. Quiet, Fallon. You're a host, nothing more. You don't belong in this war. He stepped closer to Jungkook, his voice low but venomous. Look at you, trembling, weeping, raging. Do you think that makes you strong? It makes you weak, and weakness is why I will always win. Jungkook's face contorted, the dam of years threatening to burst. His voice shook but carried like a blade. No, my weakness is what makes me human. Something you'll never understand, and tonight, weakness is stronger than you. The words struck like a hammer. The audience erupted, screaming Jungkook's name, their voices filling the room like a tidal wave. Bangsi's composure cracked, a flicker of fury flashing in his eyes. He leaned in, whispering for only Jungkook to hear. You've signed your death warrant. Everything you love, everything you are, it ends tonight. Jungkook whispered back, his lips trembling but his eyes locked in defiance. Then let it end, but the world will remember me as the one who finally spoke. Jimmy's tears streamed freely now, his voice shaking as he addressed the camera. You're seeing history. You're seeing the truth no one wanted you to see. Whatever happens after tonight, don't forget this moment. The chants outside grew louder, shaking the building. Security swarmed the stage, unsure whether to protect Jungkook or restrain him. Producers screamed into their earpieces, torn between fear and duty. Bangsi straightened, his calm mask snapping back into place. Enjoy your moment, Jungkook. It will be your last. He turned, walking off stage with the composure of a man who still believed he owned the world. But the fire in Jungkook's eyes told another story. He stood tall, trembling but unbroken, his voice rising over the storm. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. The audience erupted, the chants now a deafening roar. The studio shook under the weight of revolution. And in that firestorm of truth and terror, Jungkook's vow cut through like lightning, igniting something far larger than himself. The empire had been challenged. The mask had been torn. And for the first time, BANGSI HYUK looked like a man who might finally bleed. The studio was no longer a stage. It had become an arena of raw truth and unmasked power. Every corner of the room vibrated with noise, the chants outside growing louder, the audience inside half sobbing, half screaming, and the producers tearing at their hair as they realized there was no stopping what had already begun. The cameras still rolled, streaming to millions across the world, and the network, paralyzed by fear and fascination, hadn't yet cut the feed. Jungkook stood center stage, his chest rising and falling with each ragged breath, sweat glistening under the relentless lights. His eyes were locked on the space where BANGSI HYUK had just exited, and his voice, hoarse but sharp, shattered the tense air. You heard him! You heard the way he spoke, as if he owns us, as if our humanity is nothing but a business transaction. His hands shook, his voice trembling into a roar. This is the monster we served for years. This is the man who made us bleed behind closed doors while the world cheered for the illusion he sold. The audience erupted into cheers and cries of anguish, the sound echoing like 1,000 broken hearts. Jimmy, his hands gripping the desk as though it might anchor him, raised his voice over the din. "Jungkook, listen to me. You've torn open a wound the world has never seen. But now you have to protect yourself. He won't stop. He won't let this stand. He'll come after you, after everyone you love." Jungkook turned sharply, his eyes blazing. "Then let him. Let him chase me, threaten me, destroy me if he can. I've been destroyed before. But what about the truth, Jimmy? What about the voices that never got the chance to speak? What about the ones who vanished because they dared to fight back?" His voice cracked with emotion. "If I fall, at least I fall screaming the truth." Suddenly, a voice shouted from the audience. A young man, face pale and trembling, stood up. "He's right. I was one of them." Security surged forward to silence him, but the cameras caught his desperate cry. "I trained under BANGSI's system. I saw what they did, how they broke us until we couldn't breathe." The studio exploded into chaos, screams and shouts colliding as the young man was dragged toward the exit. Jungkook lunged forward, his voice tearing through the bedlam. "Let him speak. Don't silence him too." Jimmy stood, pointing at the security. "Stop. Don't touch him. Let him talk." The young man broke free for a moment, his voice shaking, his eyes wild with terror. "They forced us into contracts that stole our lives. They said if we disobeyed, we'd lose everything, our families, our futures, even our names." Tears streamed down his face as security finally restrained him. "Jungkook is telling the truth. Don't let them erase him like they erased the rest of us." The cameras captured every word, every desperate scream. The audience erupted, some sobbing, some shouting in rage. Jimmy's face turned ashen, his voice quivering. "My God, how deep does this go?" Jungkook's voice cut through, trembling with both rage and grief. "Deeper than you can imagine. It's not just about music, it's about control, about owning lives. They turned dreams into cages, and every smile you saw was painted over scars." The young man was dragged out, his cries echoing down the hallway. The studio fell into a haunted silence, every person inside frozen by the gravity of what they had just witnessed. Jimmy turned to Jungkook, his hands shaking as he pressed them flat on the desk. "You're risking everything, your safety, your future, maybe even your life. Why keep going?" Jungkook looked at him, his eyes bloodshot but unyielding. "Because if I stop, they win. If I stop, the truth dies with me. I'm not speaking just for me. I'm speaking for every voice they stole, every soul they silenced. And if my blood is the price, then so be it." Jimmy's lips trembled, his tears unrestrained now. "You don't deserve this. None of you deserve this." Jungkook shook his head, his voice soft but resolute. "We all deserve freedom. We deserve to be seen as human, not as products. And if this is the only way to reclaim it, then I'll keep screaming until they rip the last breath from me." A crashing sound erupted backstage, metal clattering, shouts of struggle. The audience screamed, some ducking, others clinging to one another. Security rushed toward the noise, their radios crackling with frantic calls. Jimmy grabbed Jungkook's arm, his voice frantic. "We have to get you out of here. They're not going to wait until this ends. They're coming for you now." Jungkook yanked his arm free, his face contorted with fury. "No, I won't run anymore. If they want me, let them take me right here, in front of the whole world. Let everyone see exactly who they are." The lights above flickered violently, casting the stage into momentary darkness before buzzing back on. In that fractured glow, Jungkook stepped toward the cameras, his face drenched in sweat and tears, his voice carrying with the weight of a man who had been silenced too long. "BANGSI HYUK is not a genius. He is not a savior. He is a tyrant who built an empire on broken bodies and stolen voices. And tonight, I tear off his mask. If you believe in me, if you believe in the truth, don't let them bury this. Don't let them bury me." The audience rose to their feet, screaming his name, chanting through tears. Outside, the crowd's roar grew louder, a storm surging against the walls. Jimmy covered his mouth, sobbing openly as he whispered, "Dear God, this is bigger than all of us." And as the chaos closed in, as the world outside boiled into protest and fury, Jungkook stood tall, trembling but unbroken, his words burning like fire through every screen across the globe. The storm had only begun, and the empire was cracking. The studio was cracking under the weight of revelation. The roar from outside was no longer just chants. It was a tidal wave of fury, love, fear, and disbelief colliding in a single deafening sound. Police lines had failed to contain the masses, and the chants of "Free Jungkook" rolled like thunder through the night. Inside, the air reeked of sweat, hot metal from overworked lights, and the tang of panic that clung to every breath. Jimmy Fallon was no longer trying to control the show. He was gripping the desk as if it might save him from drowning. His voice was hoarse, trembling. "Jungkook, I don't know how to keep this from collapsing. Do you hear them out there? Do you realize the world is splitting in half right now because of what you said?" Jungkook stood at the edge of the stage, his face pale but burning with defiance. "Then let it split. If the truth divides the world, so be it. It means they finally see the cracks we lived inside." He turned toward the audience, his voice rising. "How many more idols will vanish before people understand? How many will collapse on stage, smile through pain, disappear behind silence? I won't let it happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone." A woman in the front row sobbed openly, shouting, "We believe you!" Her voice triggered a chain reaction, and suddenly the audience surged to their feet, chanting Jungkook's name, some crying, others screaming in rage at the shadow of BANGSI HYUK's power. From backstage, another voice pierced the frenzy. "Stop this madness before it destroys everything!" A man in a navy suit stormed into the lights, his face flushed with rage and fear. He was older, heavier, his voice booming like a courtroom verdict. "Jungkook, enough! You don't know what you're unleashing. Do you want to tear down the entire industry? Do you want to see every artist burn just to prove a point?" Jungkook's jaw tightened. He recognized the man instantly, a board member, one of the architects of the machine. His fists clenched, his voice shaking with fury. "I don't want artists to burn, I want them to breathe. And if the industry has to collapse for that to happen, then let it collapse." The man sneered, turning to the cameras as if addressing the millions watching. "Look at him, he's lost, he's unstable. Do you really think this trembling boy is a hero? He's being reckless, selfish, ready to ruin the lives of everyone he claims to love? Is this your savior?" Jimmy slammed his hand on the desk, his voice breaking. "No, don't twist this. He's not selfish. He's finally speaking after years of silence." His body shook with fury as he turned to Jungkook. "Don't let them gaslight you. Not here. Not now." Jungkook stepped closer to the man, his face pale but burning with conviction. "You call me unstable because I'm shaking, because I'm crying, because I'm human? Then yes, I'm unstable, because what you did to us broke us. And I'll show the world every crack until they see the monster you built behind the mask." The man's face darkened, his voice dripping venom. "You're making a mistake that will haunt you for the rest of your short life." Jungkook's lips trembled, but his voice carried like fire. "Then let me be haunted, better haunted by the truth than chained by your lies." There. The audience erupted into screams of support, their voices drowning out the executive's fury. Jimmy's tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "You're braver than anyone I've ever met." Suddenly, a crash echoed from backstage. A set of lights toppled, sparks flying across the floor. People screamed as smoke filled the air, security rushing to contain the chaos. The executive was dragged back by guards, his threats echoing even as he disappeared. "This isn't the end. You're finished, Jungkook. Finished." Jungkook coughed through the smoke, his hand gripping the microphone stand like a lifeline. His voice cracked, but he forced it into the haze. "Finished? No, this is where I begin." He turned to the camera, his face drenched in sweat and tears. "To everyone watching, don't let them turn me into a villain. Don't let them erase me like they erased so many others. Hold on to this moment, share it, protect it, because it's bigger than me. It's about freedom. It's about truth." The audience roared, their voices echoing the storm outside. Some shouted his name, others cried uncontrollably, and the chants of "Truth, truth, truth" shook the very walls. Jimmy, trembling beside him, clutched Jungkook's arm. "You're not alone anymore. Do you hear them? You're not alone." Jungkook's eyes closed for a moment, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. But when he opened them, his gaze burned with something unbreakable. "Then let's see how far they're willing to go to silence us. Because I won't stop. Not now. Not ever." The camera zoomed closer, capturing his trembling body, his tear-streaked face, his voice rising against the storm. The world was no longer watching a late-night show. They were watching a rebellion ignite. And in that chaos, in the fire of voices refusing to be silenced, Jungkook stood taller, fragile but defiant, knowing the war had only just begun. The smoke had barely cleared when the studio doors burst open. Security was shouting into radios, producers screamed orders no one could follow, and the audience stood caught between fear and adrenaline. But what truly froze the room was the sight of several men in black entering, their earpieces glowing, their eyes cold. They weren't regular security, they were enforcers, the kind that belonged more to governments and corporations than television studios. Jimmy Fallon's voice cracked as he instinctively stepped in front of Jungkook. "What is this? Who are they? This is my show." One of the men in black raised a hand to silence him. His voice was calm, too calm. "This broadcast ends now. Step aside, Mr. Fallon." Jungkook's entire body stiffened. His fingers dug into the microphone, knuckles white, voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the tension. "If you take me now, everyone watching will know exactly what you are. Predators, tyrants. And no matter how hard you try, you won't erase the truth that's already out there." The man in black didn't flinch. His gaze was empty, mechanical. The world forgets quickly. Fear makes them obedient. You'll be a memory by morning. The audience erupted in screams, some rushing forward, others trying to flee. Phones were held high despite the danger, flashes bursting like tiny lightning bolts. Jimmy's face was drenched in sweat as he shouted over the madness. "No! Don't you dare touch him! Millions are watching, you bastards!" The lead enforcer tilted his head, smirking faintly. "Millions? Streams can be cut, feeds can be scrubbed, headlines can be rewritten." He stepped closer to Jungkook. "What cannot be undone is your silence. That will be permanent." Jungkook's chest heaved, his tears spilling freely, but his voice roared with desperation. "Then kill me on camera, right here, right now. Let the world see the monster you serve." The audience shrieked, the chant of his name now mixed with terror. Jimmy grabbed Jungkook's arm, his own voice breaking. "Don't say that, don't give them that chance." But Jungkook turned to him, eyes blazing with raw fire. "What choice do I have? Running won't save me, hiding won't save me. The only thing that matters is making sure the world never forgets what I said tonight." The lead enforcer sneered. "You think you're a martyr. But martyrs only matter if people believe their story. And tomorrow, your story will be rewritten." Jungkook leaned forward, almost chest to chest with him now, his voice dropping into a growl. "Not this time, not when the people are watching, not when the silence is finally broken." From the back of the studio, a voice cried out. It was the young trainee who had been dragged away earlier. His face was bruised, but his spirit unbroken. He pushed through the guards, screaming, "He's telling the truth. I was there too. I saw it all." Chaos erupted as the audience roared, some reaching for the boy, some shouting at security. The enforcers tried to seize him, but he fought like a man possessed. "They locked us in practice rooms for days, without food, without sleep. They made us sign contracts that gave them our lives. Jungkook is right. He's right." Jungkook's heart nearly gave out. He reached toward the boy, his voice breaking. "Don't stop. Say it. Say everything they did to you." The boy sobbed, his words tumbling out between gasps. "They told me my family would suffer if I left. They told me I was worthless unless I obeyed. They said the fans would hate me if I failed. And when I collapsed, they just replaced me with someone else." The studio shook with screams. Jimmy covered his mouth, horrified, tears streaming down his face. "Oh my God, this is slavery. It's slavery." The enforcers surged forward, but the audience blocked them, a human shield rising against the machine. Phones filmed everything, capturing not just Jungkook's words now, but the testimony of another survivor. Jungkook pulled the boy close, his voice trembling with both rage and pride. "You're not worthless. You're free now. And together, we'll make sure they never do this again." The enforcers drew closer, their patience gone. One spoke into his earpiece. "Containment failing. Permission to extract by force." Jimmy stepped in front of Jungkook and the boy, his voice thundering. "If you touch them, you'll have to go through me, and I promise you the world will never forgive what it sees here tonight." The lead enforcer snarled. "Then so be it." Suddenly, the studio doors slammed open again, not with suits, not with security, but with fans. Hundreds had broken past the barricades outside, flooding into the building with posters, banners, and voices that shook the rafters. They chanted Jungkook's name, drowning out the threats, their faces fierce with defiance. Jungkook's knees nearly buckled at the sight. He clutched the microphone, his voice raw with emotion. "Do you see? Do you hear them? You can't silence this! You can't silence us!" The crowd thundered, their voices colliding with his. "Truth! Truth! Truth!" Jimmy raised his arms, tears blurring his vision. The world is watching. The world is awake. The enforcers froze, overwhelmed by the sheer force of human resistance pressing in from every direction. For the first time, their power seemed small, fragile, exposed. And in that storm, with fans and survivors standing as one, Jungkook's voice soared above it, all broken, trembling but unyielding. "BANGSI HYUK, your empire ends tonight." The roar that followed shook the studio to its foundations. A sound too vast, too furious, too human to ever be erased. The studio had become a battlefield of voices. Fans filled the aisles, their chants crashing like waves against the walls. Enforcers stood rigid, their hands twitching toward hidden weapons, but even they seemed hesitant now, outnumbered and surrounded by a tide of human fury. The lights above flickered wildly, casting everything in fractured bursts of white and shadow. The cameras still rolled, capturing every second, every tear, every scream, broadcasting it to a world that could no longer look away. Jungkook clung to the microphone stand as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. His throat was raw, his chest heaving, his sweat-soaked shirt clinging to his trembling body. But his eyes, they burned like torches against the storm. He turned toward the enforcers, his voice cutting sharp. "You see them? You see these people? You can't silence all of us. No matter how many contracts you write, no matter how many threats you whisper in the dark, the truth is louder than your chains." The lead enforcer's jaw flexed. He raised his hand, signaling to his team, "We end this now." But before they could move, Jimmy Fallon slammed both hands down on his desk, his voice cracking with fury. "No, you will not touch him. This is my studio, my show, and I won't let it become your execution ground." He stepped around the desk, his body between Jungkook and the black-suited men. His usual comedic sparkle was gone. He looked like a man ready to lose everything rather than betray what was unfolding before him. The enforcer sneered, his voice dripping contempt. "You think this matters? Do you think the world will protect him tomorrow when the news bends to us, when the footage disappears, when people are told this was nothing but a meltdown?" Jungkook's voice roared over him, so loud it cracked through the screams of the crowd. "Then let them call it a meltdown. Let them twist it. But every single person who hears me tonight will remember. And memories are the one thing you can't erase." The fans erupted, their chants deafening. "We remember, we remember." The enforcers faltered. They had never faced resistance like this, not on this scale, not with cameras live and millions recording. One of them muttered to the leader, "Too exposed. This will backfire." The lead enforcer growled, but his voice wavered. "Then we break him later, when the lights are off." Jungkook heard it. His chest tightened. But instead of retreating, he stepped forward, closer to the cameras, his voice shaking but firm. "You want to break me later? Go ahead. But tonight, I am not alone. Tonight, the world stands with me." He raised his trembling hand toward the crowd. "Look at them. Look at the people you've underestimated for too long. You built your empire on silence, but silence is dead now, and when silence dies, tyrants fall." The audience screamed so loudly it rattled the rafters. Phones shot upward, capturing every angle, every word. Suddenly, from backstage, a chillingly familiar voice slithered into the chaos. "Well spoken, Jungkook, but you forget I taught you how to perform." BANGSI HYUK stepped back into the light. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His calm presence sucked the air from the room, the kind of calm that hides blades behind the smile. He walked slowly onto the stage, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, his face carved into a mask of authority. The enforcers straightened immediately, retreating behind him like soldiers yielding to their general. The room went silent, save for the chants outside that bled through the walls. Jimmy's face turned white. "Oh my God!" Bangsi's eyes locked on Jungkook. "You think you've won something here tonight? No. All you've done is expose your weakness. You tremble, you weep, and you call it bravery. But to me, it's pathetic. You've given them a spectacle, nothing more. And when the world moves on tomorrow, I will still be standing. You, however, will be ash. Jungkook's hands shook violently, but he refused to step back. His voice cracked but grew stronger with every syllable. No. What's pathetic is a man who hides behind contracts and fear because he's too weak to face the truth. You can't intimidate me anymore. Not here, not tonight. Bangsi's smile faltered just for a second. You think these people will protect you? They'll forget. Fans forget. Love fades. And when they do, you'll be left with nothing. Jungkook shouted, his voice breaking but deafening. Then I'll take nothing, because nothing is better than living as your prisoner. The audience erupted, their voices shaking the walls. Some were crying, some were screaming, but all were united in defiance. Free him! Free him! Jimmy turned on Bangsi, his tears giving way to rage. Do you even hear yourself? You're confessing in front of the world. Every word you speak exposes you. Bangsi's gaze flicked to Jimmy, cold and dismissive. The world listens only to the story I choose to tell. Jungkook stepped closer, face to face with the man who had haunted his life. His voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried through the microphones. Not anymore. Tonight, the story is mine. The camera zoomed in, capturing the trembling fury in his face, the icy crack in Bangsi's mask. For the first time, the titan of an empire looked fragile, exposed, human. The crowd inside erupted again, and outside the chants turned into a roar of revolution. The police lines collapsed, the mass of fans flooding toward the building. Jimmy grabbed the microphone, his voice hoarse but steady. This is no longer a show, this is history, and history won't forget tonight. The lights blazed brighter, the chants thundered, and Bangsi's eyes narrowed into something darker than rage, a flicker of fear. And in that electric storm, Jungkook whispered like a vow, his voice cracking with tears but unbreakable. Your empire ends here. The storm outside the studio had become a living organism, thousands of voices fusing into one monstrous roar that shook the windows. Police could no longer contain it, and waves of fans pushed against barricades with the force of a revolution. Inside, the set of Jimmy Fallon's show had mutated into a war zone of ideology and defiance. The lights were too hot, the air too heavy, and every second on live television felt like a century. Jungkook stood across from BANGSI HYUK, his chest heaving, his sweat-soaked shirt clinging to his body. His fists trembled, not from fear alone, but from rage restrained too long. He looked at the man who had once been called his mentor, his producer, his savior, and now only saw a predator cloaked in the illusion of genius. Bangsi broke the silence first, his voice cold, smooth, too measured. Do you think this ends with your words, Jungkook? Do you think shouting into a camera makes you a hero? You're still mine. Every contract, every song, every image of you belongs to me. You can't cut those chains by crying in front of strangers. The audience erupted in boos, some shouting liar, while others screamed Jungkook's name. Jimmy slammed his fist on the desk, his face red with fury. That's not art. That's slavery. Do you even hear yourself? You've admitted it again and again. Bangsi turned to him, smiling thinly. Mr. Fallon, you've made a career out of laughter, out of smiles, but you're naive. You don't understand what people want. They don't want truth. They want fantasy. They don't want idols. They want gods. And I gave them gods. His gaze snapped back to Jungkook. And you, my boy, were the brightest of them. You think they'll still love you once you've torn down the illusion? No. They'll hate you for destroying their dream. Jungkook's voice cracked as he shouted back. Then let them hate me, because at least it will be real. I would rather be hated for the truth than worshipped for a lie. The audience roared, some rising to their feet, clapping, screaming, sobbing. Phones glowed like a constellation of witnesses, capturing every second. Bangsi's calm finally fractured. His voice rose, sharp as glass. You were nothing before me, do you remember? A terrified boy begging for a chance, drowning in insecurity. I gave you the world, I made you a legend, and now you dare to betray me? Jungkook's tears spilled, his voice shaking but fierce. You didn't make me a legend. The fans did. My brothers did. The nights we bled together, the mornings we couldn't breathe, the songs we poured our souls into, that's what made me. Not you. He pointed at Bangsi with a trembling hand. All you ever did was steal what was already ours. Jimmy's voice cracked as he stepped closer, his hand on Jungkook's shoulder. He's right. You didn't create him. You caged him. Bangsi's eyes darkened, his mask of control slipping further. You think this little rebellion will change anything? Tomorrow the networks will call it a breakdown. The headlines will call it hysteria. And you'll be nothing more than a cautionary tale. Jungkook's chest heaved, his voice dropping into a whisper that carried through the entire studio. No. Tomorrow they'll remember that I dared to speak, and they'll remember that you couldn't silence me. The fans outside screamed louder, their chants shaking the floor. We hear you! We hear you! Suddenly, the young trainee who had spoken earlier broke free from the crowd of security again, his face bruised, his voice hoarse but determined. He screamed from the back of the stage. He's telling the truth! I was there too! They broke us until we couldn't move, and then they told us to smile. Chaos exploded. Fans inside cried out in solidarity, reaching for him, shouting his name, though they didn't even know it. The enforcers moved toward him, but this time the audience surged forward, blocking them, their bodies a shield. Jungkook reached toward the boy, his voice breaking with both rage and tenderness. You're not alone anymore. None of us are alone anymore. Bangsi's voice boomed, his fury finally unchained. Enough! This is over! He gestured sharply, and the enforcers stepped forward again. Take him off this stage! Jimmy threw himself in front of Jungkook, his voice ragged. You'll have to go through me first. The enforcers hesitated, the cameras capturing every move, every face. Millions were watching, millions recording. Every action would be immortalized. Jungkook took the microphone in both hands, his body trembling, his eyes locked on Bangsi, his voice cracked but carried like fire. Take me if you want. Destroy me if you can. But the world will remember this night as the night your mask finally broke. And when it does, you'll fall not because I'm strong, but because the truth is stronger than you. The audience erupted into a single deafening chant. Truth, truth, truth. Bangsi stood frozen, his face pale beneath the lights, the first shadow of fear crossing his expression. His empire had been untouchable for decades. But in this moment, on this stage, the cracks were visible. Jimmy raised his voice, hoarse but unyielding. You can't stop this anymore. The world is awake, and they'll never go back to sleep. The fans outside broke through the final barricade. Their voices thundered into the studio as the doors burst open, the sound of thousands flooding in, chanting Jungkook's name. Bangsi's composure faltered completely. His eyes darted to the enforcers, to the cameras, to the unstoppable tide of humanity pressing in. For the first time, the man who had built an empire on fear looked small. And in that moment, Jungkook's trembling body stood taller than the titan before him. His voice, drenched in tears but blazing with fire, carried into the storm. This is the end of your empire, and the beginning of ours. The studio exploded with sound screams, chants, sobs, the roar of thousands uniting as one. The cameras captured it all, the truth unleashed, unstoppable, eternal. The studio could barely hold the storm that had entered it. Fans had broken past security and now filled the aisles, their faces flushed with tears, rage, and something close to religious fervor. They shouted Jungkook's name like it was both a weapon and a prayer. The enforcers stood stiff, their hands twitching near their hidden weapons. But they were no longer the most powerful in the room. The balance had shifted. Humanity itself had poured into the building, and it refused to be silenced. BANGSI HYUK stood still at the center of it all, his polished shoes gleaming beneath the blinding lights, his expression calm but his jaw tight. He scanned the crowd like a king surveying a rebellion, but his eyes betrayed the faintest crack in his composure. He wasn't in control anymore, and everyone could feel it. Jimmy Fallon stood between Bangsi and Jungkook, his normally playful face transformed into something raw, determined. He pointed at the cameras, shouting with a voice that trembled but carried. Millions are watching. Don't let them shut this down. Record everything. Share everything. Tonight isn't just about entertainment. Tonight is about truth. The crowd roared back. Phones raised higher, the glow of their screens turning the studio into a sea of small lights, stars that would carry the truth far beyond these walls. Bangsi finally spoke, his voice cold and deliberate. You think this is power? A mob of fans screaming into the void? They will tire, they will forget. And when they do, Jungkook will be nothing but a broken boy who thought he could bite the hand that fed him. Jungkook's body shook, his breath ragged, but he stepped forward, microphone in hand, tears streaking his face. His voice cracked, but grew sharper with every word. No, they won't forget. Not this time, because this isn't about me anymore. This is about every artist you caged, every dream you twisted, every voice you buried. They will remember because their own lives are tied to this. A young woman in the audience cried out, her voice splitting the air. My brother trained under you. He disappeared. Where is he? The room fell into a stunned silence as she sobbed openly. Where did you send him? All eyes snapped to Bangsi. His face remained calm, but his silence was louder than any denial. The woman screamed again, her voice breaking, Tell me! Jungkook's voice thundered, trembling with rage. How many? How many families have to ask the same question? How many disappeared because of you? Bangsi finally snapped, his voice rising. They were weak. They couldn't handle the pressure. I gave them a chance at greatness, and they failed. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Phone zoomed in, capturing every flicker of his fury. Jimmy stepped closer, his voice hoarse with disgust. Do you even hear yourself? You're admitting it. You're saying they broke because of what you did to them. Bangsi sneered. If they broke, they were never meant to shine. The world doesn't want the weak. It wants perfection, and I delivered it. Jungkook's tears spilled freely now, his chest heaving as his voice cracked with fury. No, you destroyed them. You destroyed us. You made us bleed and called it perfection. You made us suffer and called it art, and the world applauded because they didn't know the price. The fans inside screamed, their chants clashing with sobs. Some shouted, "Monster!" Others cried Jungkook's name until their throats gave out. The sound was overwhelming, primal. The young trainee who had spoken earlier staggered forward again, bruised but unbroken. His voice was hoarse but defiant. I was one of them too. I watched my friends collapse. Some never came back. And you, he pointed at Bangsi, his hand shaking, you told us it was our fault. Bangsi's mask finally cracked, his face contorting with rage. Because it was. Weakness has no place in this world. Jungkook screamed back, his voice echoing through the studio like thunder. Then call me weak, call me broken, but I am still standing here and I will never let you silence us again. The roar of the crowd was deafening, so loud the walls themselves seemed to shake. Jimmy covered his face with one hand, his body trembling with sobs, but he still shouted into the microphone. Do you hear him? Do you hear them? The age of silence is over. Bangsi looked around, his composure disintegrating, his empire collapsing, not with contracts or lawsuits, but with voices. He pointed at Jungkook, his hand trembling with fury. You think you've won tonight? You've only signed your own destruction. They will turn on you. They always do. Jungkook lifted his chin, his voice low but unbreakable. Maybe they will, but I'd rather be destroyed telling the truth than live forever as your lie. The fans screamed his name, their voices a tidal wave of devotion and defiance. Outside, the barricades shattered completely and the roar of thousands surged closer, flooding the studio with unstoppable energy. For the first time, Bangsi Hyuk looked afraid. His empire, built on silence and fear, was crumbling before his eyes. Jungkook's voice, hoarse but blazing, cut through the storm one final time. This is not the end of me. This is the end of you. And with those words, the chant swelled into a force too great to contain, shaking the studio, the city, and perhaps the world beyond.